Venkatesh, who is joined by banking veteran KV Kamath with her for an exclusive chat. Lata, over to you.
Thank you very much for that, Arib. Yes, we are cutting normal programming and getting into this special show because my guest today is very special. He's someone who is quite clearly the first name and the last word on Indian banking. In fact, now he's the only Indian who can be counted as one of the most important global bankers. Mr. KV Kamath, President of the New Development Bank. He commands an authorized capital of $100 billion, subscribed capital of $50 billion, and I think $10 billion has already been paid in. So that's lots of money, Mr. Kamath. Thank you very much for finding time for us at CNBC TV 18.
Thank you, Lata. Always a pleasure.
Well, first up, sir, because you sit at a vantage point and the world is looking so skittish, let me start with the global markets itself before I come to the BRICS summit and the development bank that you head. You know, like we were discussing, equity valuations are at near all-time highs and bond prices are at all-time highs. Even corporate bond yields have fallen so much. This is a contradiction. Are you worried something will give?
Yeah, I think I would use the word I'm watchful rather than worried. Because from where I sit and maybe what we set out to do, we look at other things that are critical in this skittish market. And what are those? The liquidity. I think liquidity is at a level where it's unprecedented, you could say. There will be a flight for quality. And at the same time, for a good borrower, the interest rates could not be lower. So clearly, we are sitting at a good time to borrow and lend to our constituents. So in all this skittishness, I look at these as signs of comfort, as it were. But there are very interesting challenges, apart from the liquid market.
So just draw for us what you see as red flags, considering that, the markets are looking very skittish. Yeah. Should we worry? In January, it was this sudden Chinese devaluation, which ultimately turned out to be not so bad at all. What might be the next red flag?
Yeah, I think some of the red flags I already see. The way, interest rate that I mentioned, which is low, is to me also a red flag, because how do you correct it to a level where, things even out? For example, at these rates of interest, no treasury makes money. At these rates of interest, pension funds, are underfunded to a very large extent. And in some cases, the topping up that you need to do even exceeds the wage bill. These sort of situations are arising. So that makes me nervous. But at the same time, low interest rates and ample liquidity would mean that global business should be going on fine. And of course, the question is, who's driving this business?
That's true. There are question marks even on growth itself, perhaps. But do you think the Fed hike is what might rattle markets? Or do you think your old area of expertise, banks, might drive the skittishness?
No, I think there are a variety of things that are driving skittishness. One day it is something, next day it is something else. So as you said, at this point in time, the Fed hike is an event which is a quarterly event, as it were, and there is a watchfulness there, and then there is nervousness there, and you have a reaction in the market. And the second day is something that happens, say, in the oil market. There is skittishness about that. This new element has now been drafted in again about banks in certain regions of the world.
So Deutsche Bank gave us a bit of a heart attack.
Yeah, so there is a nervousness there. So I would guess that it is a new event every day that comes up, and and changes the equilibrium that is required for the market to move in an even manner, as it were. But if you look at underlying, I think we then need to deconstruct all these things and construct what is really driving. Actually, if you look at the US is not doing too badly, and then you pick various markets and try to see where is it that nervousness could be genuinely a cause of concern. I think that there are not too many spots, but we are, I think, taking too many things and analyzing them at the same time and creating worry in our minds.
Okay, so let me come to India itself. Last time when the taper tantrum noise grew louder, we suffered badly. Now there could be another Fed hike, or there could be a banking problem in Europe. We don't know. Would you say that we are better prepared?
Well, let me look at it, dispassionately. whatever happens there, to what extent should it really impact us? It will impact us certainly to the extent of flows coming into the capital market. Yes, we factor that in. Does it distort our ability to do business as a nation? I don't think it impacts it at all. I think what impacts us, things within our hands, and those are clearly in terms of priority, where I would think the GST, which has been, the bill has been passed. So I think that's a big, big plus. Immediate thing that comes into mind is in India is the monsoon. Yes. Good. So second thing has happened. I would think that a large consuming market, which is now 2 trillion plus, and I would think going at a fairly rapid rate. My looking around the last 2 days in Mumbai, I think is a big plus. I think industry is coming back. There is unutilized capacity which is getting and will be utilized. I think low interest rates are going to be here to stay. And I was again told in the last 1.5 days, trying to talk to people, that the tightening that this government has done to ensure that distribution of essential commodities and food grains and other things, yes, clearly will put a lid on distortions that were happening. We won't go into why they were happening, but clearly will put a curb on that. Seventh, I'm counting. Seventh is the declaration scheme, which I think was a great success. Eighth, and I will stop there, is the whole push of technology, in which I would say the tax machinery can be tightened, and so many other positive things can be done in the context of, say, distribution to people who are needy and so on, avoiding losses. We are not factoring this when you talk of India. To me, these 8 things really drive Indian growth going forward. And if I then step back and say, yes, private sector, new investment is not happening, but I compensate that, or it will be compensated, more than compensated, by the efforts being put on the road front, by the efforts being put on the rail front, by the efforts being put on the power generation front, and so on. So to me, private sector engine will kickstart with a lag. It happened in 2001, 2002 also. So I don't think we should be worried about it. It will happen. And possibly that will also give us a time to clean up the banking system. So to me, if I look at India, we are all set for a hike in growth from the number we have. Again, I have not been optimistic for the last 2-3 years. So you would not have heard me talk about, I see a 1% jump in growth happening. Now I can't see how a growth jump will not happen in India. Given these 8 positives, I would think that we are looking at a percent and a half in the next year to 18 months in our country.
That's good to hear, sir, especially now that you watch the country from a distance. Well, actually, I missed you a lot in the last several years when some of those interesting things happened that you referred to. For instance, technology. Before I come to the UPI and the payment license and the payment interface and how it can change, first, banking license on tap. From that distance, how did it look? You worked at a time when even branch licenses were rationed. Now licenses on tap.
Indeed.
Does it look like we are on to something big?
No, we are on to something big. Branch licenses are on a licensed basis, limited to 50. You took an ATM, there was...
Right, there you have it, a very positive Mr. Kamath on the economy, saying that within the next year and a half, you could expect a 1 to 1.5% jump in GDP. So very optimistic.